On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Spokane area, welcome to our 2020 General Election Candidate Forum featuring candidates for State Representative Legislative District 3, Position 2. I am Ann Murphy, your moderator. Election day for the 2020 election is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. Ballots will be mailed to all registered voters about 3 weeks prior to Election Day and must be postmarked or deposited in conveniently located ballot boxes no later than 8 p.m. on Election Day. The League recommends returning your ballot as early as possible. You can register to vote by mail or online by October 26, 2020. For additional opportunities to register to vote, there is a downtown site from now through Saturday, October 31st at the Elections Office at 1033 West Gardner, 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. The Elections Office will not be open for in-person services on November 2nd and 3rd. Instead, you can do this process at the Veterans Memorial Arena North Entrance at 751 West Boone. That will be Monday, 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then on Tuesday, Election Day, November 3rd, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can also get these services at the Spokane Valley site at the Center Place Event Center, and these will be October 16th through November 3rd, including Saturday, October 31st, 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. For other questions about casting your ballot or information about the candidates, contact the Spokane County Elections Office, 509-477-2320, or visit their website, spokanecounty.org/elections, or on the League of Women Voters online voters guide at vote411.org. I will be asking the candidates questions that have been formulated by the League's Voter Services Committee, and will ask as many questions as time allows. Before the questions begin, the candidates will have up to 30 seconds to introduce themselves and tell the voters why they are running. Candidates will have up to 1 minute to answer each question, with additional time for rebuttal or a follow-up question as appropriate. Each candidate will also have an opportunity for one 30-second rebuttal on a question of their choice. Each candidate will have the opportunity for a 30-second closing statement. The first speaker will alternate with each question. So now to introduce our candidates. They are Bob Apple, Republican, and Timm Ormsby, Democrat. So starting with you, Mr. Apple, you have 30 seconds to tell us why you're running for state representative. Go ahead.
Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to speak with the voters that I might otherwise not get a chance to. I'm running because these are trying times. We have a lot of things that I think bother all of us today, and more than ever, I think they bother me too. So I have decided to run for office. I want to see change. I want to see representative government. I want to see legislative process fulfilled. I want to see laws enacted by the people. And right now, I'm not seeing that. So I have some real deep concerns when we see edicts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ormsby, for you, why are you running?
Well, thank you. And again, thank you to the League for putting on these forums in very challenging times. Timm Ormsby, born and raised here in Spokane. I am running because of these deeply troubling times and because I think we need a steady hand at the tiller. I've been honored to be chosen for this job over the course of the last several elections, and honored also by my colleagues to be the chair of the House Appropriations Committee that formulates the state budget. And now more than ever, I think we need that experience.
Thank you. Now we'll start with some questions to hone in on things. So we'll start with you, Mr. Ormsby. What do you consider to be the most important responsibilities of a state legislator, and what specific training, experience, and skills do you have that have prepared you for this position?
I think the most important thing that a state representative can do is be accountable to the people, to justify government programs, services, budgets to identify opportunities and challenges in their community and strive to overcome the challenges and leverage the opportunities for the largest benefit of our constituents. As far as what we're coming into in this COVID times, we've been slapped in the face with a worldwide pandemic and the resulting economic challenges. I think that it is incumbent on state government to continue and provide continuity and consistency to the voters, to the residents of this state, and particularly to our communities, to continue to the best of our ability those programs, services, and accountability. I think that is the job, and I think I'm suited to continue doing it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Apple, same question. The most important responsibilities.
I've served on the Spokane City Council, as many people might remember. It's been about a decade since I've done that, but I have the knowledge and expertise to understand legislation and know that it comes from the people and know that it must require a hearings process and that we work out differences in legislation that way. And that's a problem I'm not seeing happen today. I also see a major financial problem as a result of those dictations from the governor. And I also believe that it is very harmful to what's going on to the public or what the public is feeling. I think we need change, and I'm asking the voters for support. I will gladly go over to Olympia, make things right.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll go to our next question. In terms of being in the legislature, what legislative committees are you most interested in serving on? And that goes to you first, Mr. Apple.
Well, I'd like to see rules, number one, because I don't think they're being followed. And number two, obviously finance, because I hear a lot of talk and I've seen a lot of tax increases over the last few years that I don't think were warranted or necessary. I think we're providing services to people that aren't citizens, and that's not the best expense of our taxpayer money today. So I think those are the two committees I find most appealing. Whether I would get those or not is not important. I will be very effective in legislation regarding those issues.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ormsby.
Thank you for the question. I think this is the heart and soul of the legislature, is the committee process. As I said earlier, I've been honored to be chosen by my colleagues to chair the House Appropriations Committee, which is the ultimate policy committee. It is the committee that has to fund the great ideas that members bring from their district. It provides for the education from early learning, K-12 and higher ed, to healthcare, to foster kids, to all the critical things that the folks in our state rely on for the state to provide. I also sit on the Labor and Workplace Standards Committee, which is to make sure that folks in the workplace have a safe place to work, that their issues are addressed in the workplace, and that they come home at the end of a day safe and in one piece. Those are the two committees that I sit on, and would hope to continue in that role should the voters choose to send me there.
Okay, thank you. Since you're both so interested in the finances, we're going to go to our next question relating to that, and it'll start with you, Mr. Ormsby. What spending cuts, new revenue sources, or tax reform measures would you support at the state level in order to maintain a balanced budget given the significant impact of COVID-19 on revenue and expenditures? And are there any areas of spending that you think should be exempt from cuts? Mr. Ormsby.
So much of the state budget is exempt from cuts because it is either constitutionally, statutorily, or contractually encumbered, meaning that it can't be cut. So our basic education program, the delivery of our program of basic education, is constitutionally protected. So if it's a basic education item, then we must maintain it. We have to have a balanced approach in budgeting. We have to identify what we absolutely have to have, what is the minimum expectation of the people that we went there to represent and craft that budget, which is a reflection of our values. It's a moral document and a reflection of our values. We have to find ways to pay for the things that are most important to us. And that balanced approach includes considering revenue sources to pay for it. It also includes making spending reductions if that's appropriate. And we are required to have a balanced budget, and we will have a balanced budget, and it will pass. We'll just have to, the circumstances will dictate what it looks like.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Apple.
We definitely need to look at changes. My understanding is the surplus that we had built up over the last few years is gone. And that's a bad mark all by itself here in the last year. So we need major changes that will curb spending that isn't particularly necessary. And I think there's a lot of places we can look at, hone down, and file down those costs, because that needs to happen, especially if it's administrative costs within each budget. If we're not spending as much, we're going to have to cut the administrative budgets as well. And I don't think that's happening. But I'm willing to take a very good look, like I did when I was with the city, and try to work out what we can cut and what we can make as differences. But I also cannot see us raising taxes just to make up huge shortfalls for services we're not providing. Right now, education isn't getting the full attention it should. Obviously, the kids aren't in school, and I don't like that. We need some changes, and that's one of the big ones right there. But we could look through a lot of other departments. We're not seeing it.
Your time is up. Thank you. So let's move on, because the big piece we're dealing with is in our public health right now. The public health system, and Mr. Apple, this will go to you first. The public health system promotes and protects the health of the residents and communities in which they live. Generally speaking, and with respect to the state's response to the COVID-19, do you think our public health system is adequately funded? Are there specific improvements that you think might be needed, Mr. Apple?
Well, there are definitely changes that must occur. There's too much power vested in such emergencies. Right now, we've looked at, and I think everybody's seeing, the end results are that no one's in the hospitals. We're really not seeing anyone sick, but we're seeing very draconian measures applied against the public, and that needs to stop. We need to see some changes, and definitely as quickly as possible, because they're causing very bad economic and health harms. A lot of people are getting disturbed mentally and otherwise because they're sitting at home. They're not getting out. They're not interacting. This is just as bad for the homeless community that's also stuck in a rut, and we have got to make some changes. We can't allow, whoop, are we done?
Well, you finish up.
Oh, okay. We can't allow these emergencies to impede our government when they're not justified. And I do not believe that COVID has proven itself.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ormsby, same question for you on the public health system.
Thank you. And I do think we have made major improvements over the course of the last two biennial budgets, over the course of the last 4 years, to bolster public health. No one could have foreseen that we would have this global pandemic, even though something of its nature has been predicted by those knowledgeable. We have to be able to have a robust public health system. The statutes and authority that have been granted to our Department of Health and to our local public health officers were a result of these kinds of scourges that have happened over the course of the last 100 years, whether it was the Spanish flu in 1918 or the polio crisis that occurred and afflicted my own father. So funding for public health has to be there. It has been a priority, and the legislature, in a bipartisan way, dedicated $200 million of our surplus to address the challenges that we were going to be facing because of this pandemic.
Okay, thank you. So on the other side, not the health side, but our economic side, and we'll start with you, Mr. Ormsby, what has been done and what else can you propose to do to assist small businesses who are facing serious financial loss because of COVID-19? Mr. Ormsby.
We began with a robust attempt to drive out money from the unemployment insurance system, from the Employment Security Department, to a widely expanded audience than those that would otherwise have been available. That worked out to really drive a lot of economic activity, because when folks are in that situation and getting those unemployment insurance benefits, they're not padding their stock portfolio or making overseas investments. They're spending that money in the communities where they live. And we initially got very bad economic forecast back in June, when we were in the height of the uncertainty and in the height of the crisis, coming off a Memorial Day surge in infections. And just very recently, last week, we got a revised revenue forecast that consumer confidence is holding steady despite all the challenges that are out there. We must continue to provide, to relieve anxiety in the consumer's minds, and provide adequate economic activity and small business assistance.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Apple.
Well, certainly we went right out and allowed our government to shut down businesses. And as a result, most of those businesses won't be reopening. And I think at least a third have closed permanently. That's wrong. That's not acceptable. And as a health risk, if we would have seen the problem, we don't see the problem even to this day. I'm sorry. We have got to get reasonable. We need to take the mask requirement in restaurants out. It's just makes no sense. You walk in, you order, then take your mask off. Then you put your mask back on before you leave. This is draconian. Crazy. It makes no sense. And these rules have to be reasonable. They're not reasonable. And that's not going to help business till we actually do.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move into a different arena now, and we'll start with you, Mr. Apple. How important do you think it is to address climate change, and what specific actions, if any, would you support at the state level?
Well, climate change is something that's been going on for as long as man has been recording climate. And for over 2,000 years, we've got records that show the temperature of the earth up and change all kinds of things. No, there's no reason to make major changes because we don't. I'm sorry, the people who keep saying that we have a horrible problem coming can't decide whether it's an ice age or going to get hotter. And that being the case, government should not be throwing a huge amount of money away trying to second guess. And that's what is going on. It needs to stop. It's a lot of money.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ormsby, your thoughts on climate change?
I think that it is absolutely real. And as with the pandemic, I think we need to rely on the most knowledgeable people to be getting our information from the folks whose job it is to track, monitor, and predict what's happening. It's happening at a far greater rate than was anticipated even 5 years ago. And I think that we are seeing the results of climate change in this wildland fire season as the seasons get longer, as the fires become more ferocious. And that has to do with the snowpack in the mountains that we don't have that we used to. It has to do with the available amount of fresh water for families, farms, and for our wildlife. Those things are diminishing. It is a large existential threat that has to be addressed. And while climate has continually changed, it is definitely a result of man-made activity has exacerbated, increased the problem and the potential harm that can come to all of us, especially future generations.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving into another arena. What are your, we'll start with you, Mr. Ormsby. What are your greatest concerns about the criminal justice system in Washington, and how would you address them? What improvements, if any, have been made in the recent years, and what concerns do you still have?
I think that the greatest concerns I have about the criminal justice system is the unequal treatment. I think that if folks look like me, if they're white and male and have means, that is, can afford an attorney, I'm very concerned about folks that are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. This is a structure that was created to benefit folks like me, and there are those that are not benefiting for equal access to justice, for liberty and justice for all, as we pledge every day that we are in the legislature in the Pledge of Allegiance. I am most concerned about sentencing, that we proportionally provide sentencings, and that we provide programming within the institutions and allow for a reentry program when those folks leave the institutions and go back out into society so that they can be successful with employment, housing, and healthcare. We've made improvements. We have much more to do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Apple.
I think there are inequities when preferential treatment are given to certain people because of who they are or how much money they have. And that obviously needs to stop. We don't live in a country that should recognize that sort of class differentiation. So that said, that I think takes care of a lot of the concerns of the people who are protesting. And I agree to some degree with those protesters. But I also find that a lot of times protesters turned into riots, and riots turn into big problems because rioting is not legal. And we get to the point in some cases where we actually have had arsonists out there throwing flammable bombs and other things. And I'm glad the Fed has had to step in Washington and in Oregon and some other states to prosecute these certain people, but it needs to happen. We cannot just say you're exempt, you're absolved because some politician decided to use their power inappropriately.
Okay, thank you. Next question. As you all know, Senate Bill 5395 passed by the legislature in 2020 and subsequently suspended pending the results of referendum 90 on the 2020 general election ballot. And that requires all schools to provide comprehensive sexual health education by the 22-23 school year. Do you support or oppose this bill and or the referendum? And what are your reasons for your position? We'll start with you, Mr. Apple.
Well, I oppose the bill that the legislature passed. I support the public's choice to seek a referendum that is on the ballot to turn that around and basically repeal the legislation the legislature passed. I am very concerned that I do not want to see toddlers and grade schoolers taught sex. I don't think it's something that toddlers definitely have no interest or there shouldn't be any. Teaching children about this at that age, I think will cause far more problems than it will solve. And I think it was very badly thought through by the legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Ormsby, your thoughts?
I completely support the comprehensive, medically accurate sexual health curriculum that the legislature passed. And I would just note that there will be very few changes in school districts across the state. We ourselves here in the Spokane area, Spokane Public Schools, had a very public process over the course, a very lengthy course of time, to determine what is age appropriate. I consider this to be a citizenship endeavor where we teach children about their evolving bodies, about what they can expect, about things like respect, consent, what is abuse, what is appropriate, to discourage bullying, to discourage putting inappropriate pressure on others, and to recognize themselves what is good and not good behavior, what is good and not good touching, whether it's for themselves, someone that they can witness. This is an important development for our children. I support it.
Thank you. We'll go to one last question before we go to your closings, and we'll start with you, Mr. Ormsby. What would be your top priorities for legislative action in 2021?
I think that we have to address our budget challenges. We have a great bit of uncertainty, and I put that, frankly, at the feet of our federal partners who have basically had inaction at the federal level about what we can expect. Every state, every local community has suffered economically, and we can't get an answer from our federal partners about what, if anything, they're going to do. I also think that we need to address what has come up in the public health arena, as previous questions alluded to, and what came out of this internal reflection and discernment about racial and social justice. I think that if we are going to pledge for liberty and justice for all, that should be at forefront of our mind as we approach any of these public policy issues. We do not pledge for profits and markets for all. We pledge for liberty and justice for all, and that should be at the forefront of our minds as we approach this next legislative session.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Apple, your top priorities.
Due process. Right now, I see our due process being eroded and vacated. The public's right to participate, due to the changes we're seeing through video right now. We're seeing major changes that are occurring, denying people the right to testify, denying people the right to participate. These things have to be corrected. Our system cannot exist under these limited conditions. So I'm expecting I'll be working on a lot of bills to try to correct the problem. And I also think that we need to look at making sure that we cannot have government, any government or branch of government, take our rights away. We can't have the courts legislating from the bench. We can't have governors legislating from their bench. We must allow the legislature to do its job. And right now, it's just not happening. And we need tax reform.
Okay, get that in at the end. All right. All right, so we will go to your closing, and we have just a little bit extra time. So I'm going to give each of you a total of a minute to do your closing. We'll start with you, Mr. Apple.
Well, I want to thank the voters for listening. And of course, again, the League of Women Voters for having me here, because it is an opportunity to express our vast differences in this electoral process. And I don't agree with my opponent very much, it appears, from our conversation today. And that is why I think it's important and incumbent upon me as a representative to be very open with the public. Should I be elected, I will gladly be always open. Phone number, email, and very aware and willing to share information with anybody all the time and talk with them as needed. I don't think that's happening enough today. I also don't think the legislature is providing enough communications with us. And I think that needs to change. Like I said, we need to be able to interact with the legislature in order to get our opinions across. We're the ones who are supposed to be represented, the voters, not the big money people, the special interests. And that appears to be all that's getting attention today. I want to see that change, and I'll do that.
Mr. Apple, thank you very much. Mr. Ormsby, your closing, 1 minute.
Thank you. And again, thank you to the League of Women Voters for continuing this League of Women Voters voter forum, candidate forum tradition in the wake of all this uncertainty. I offer myself up again as a choice for the voters in the upcoming election as my 9th job interview for this position. I have great faith and confidence in the decisions that the good folks of the 3rd Legislative District make. And I will say this has been the honor of my life. Outside of my family and dear friends, this has been the honor of my life to represent my community in the public policy and budget process in Olympia. I don't consider it just a job. This is a vocation, a devotion that I think I pour my heart and soul into, that I stay awake at night worrying about the decisions that we make and the implications on our people. I humbly ask for your consideration for your vote in the upcoming general election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ormsby. This concludes our 2020 general election candidate forum featuring candidates for State Representative Legislative District 3, Position 2. They are again Bob Apple, Republican, and Timm Ormsby, Democrat. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you to our candidates for participating in this forum. We hope this has given you, the voters, information that will help you make an informed decision when you mark your ballot well before Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. For more information, visit our website, lwvspokane.org, or our online voters guide at vote411.org. Thank you all, and be sure to vote by November 3rd. Thank you.